All right. So we are going to kick off today's laser. I'm going to start by introducing myself, talking a little bit about the Imagination Fellowship, lasers, the Leonardo-ASU Initiative, and then we'll be introducing the directors of the Center for Science and the Imagination at Finn and Diana Aiton-Shanker to share some welcoming words. From there, we're going to invite our fellows to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into their presentations. Hi everyone, I am Jenny Strickland. I am your host for today's laser, and I'm also the program coordinator for the Leonardo-ASU Initiative, which I will say we are very excited to share. We are just about to be celebrating our 5-year anniversary with the partnership between Leonardo ISAST and Arizona State University, which I know we are actually not alone in celebrating birthdays, because Center for Science and the Imagination is actually celebrating their 10-year anniversary. So great to be joining you all during this celebratory end of semester time. Leonardo ISAST, which for those of you that don't know, ISAST stands for the International Society of Arts, Sciences, and Technology, was founded in 1968 in Paris by the kinetic artist and astronautical pioneer Frank Molina. And we began publishing the journal Leonardo that same year. Our journal is published through MIT Press, along with the Leonardo book series, which I encourage you to check out if you haven't already. So a little bit about the Imagination Fellowship. It is one of Leonardo-ASU's signature programs in collaboration with the Center for Science and the Imagination. Each cycle, we award up to 3 artists from around the world as our Imagination Fellows, in which they work to develop experimental media projects exploring diverse aspects of planetary health futures. The outcome of the 9-month fellowship is a discrete media artifact, and each of our fellows will be discussing those here today. So a little bit more about lasers. That's a program of Leonardo ISAST. It stands for Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. So we're bringing the rendezvous to you today. And each laser brings together contributors to stimulate conversations and interactions between arts, sciences, technology, and humanities. I am here representing Laser Tempe today, which is just one of the 58 host cities around the globe that host conversations like this throughout the year. My colleague Jason is going to be putting into the chat a link to additional lasers that I also encourage you to explore. There's a range of topics and conversations that you can be a part of virtually or in person. So that is what my spiel is for you today. So with that, I am going to welcome Ed, Finn, and Diana, if she is here, to share some welcoming words.
Hello, I don't see Diana, so I'll just have to channel her unless she's hiding somewhere in this Zoom. It's great to see you all. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ed Finn, and we're so delighted to be partnering with Leonardo on this fellowship. Oh dear, it sounds like she's having some technical issues, but hopefully she'll be able to join us soon. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, and it's so exciting each time we've run the fellowship to see these incredible projects that the fellows come up with, and the way that they take these prompts and explore imagination in all of these different ways. And this really speaks to the larger mission of the center, which is to inspire collective imagination for better futures. One of the most powerful acts I think we engage in, especially writers and artists, is to inspire other people to imagine new possibilities, to shift perspective, to see the world in a different way. And all of the work that you're going to hear about today and see presented today, does that in spades. And I think that that idea of building our collective capacity to imagine new possibilities, and especially to imagine new possible futures, is incredibly important. And I think we all need to be, everyone on this planet needs to feel more empowered and invited to imagine the future, to imagine new possibilities. and art is the most effective and the most compelling vehicle we have to do that kind of work. So it's really exciting to see that the fellows have been working all year on these projects. We're really excited to be part of this conversation with them. And I think if Diana were here, she would say similar things more eloquently, and she would have other clever things to say as well. So I'm sorry you only get me, but really excited for the presentations. And thank you again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ed. And we've received word that a phone battery has died. And so I'm sure that Diana will be joining as soon as she possibly can. So next up, we are going to have the fellows introduce themselves. And they're just going to do some brief introductions. And then following that, we will get into the presentations. And just a friendly reminder also, if you have questions that arise during these presentations, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be collecting them to bring them into the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So yeah, feel free as they're coming to put them in the chat. So without further ado, Alinta, Santiago, and Sean, I'd love to invite you three to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Hi, my name is Alinta Krauth. I'm a media artist and a researcher of interdisciplinary sci-art things. I'm currently in Bergen in Norway, where even though it's late at night, it's very light outside. I apologize for that. But usually, as you can tell by my accent, I'm a hermit from the middle of Australia, basically. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Santiago Reyes Villaveses. I'm a Colombian artist, researcher, and professor at the Universidad del Bosque in Bogotá. I'm currently now in Ambalema, Tolima, in the riverside of Magdalena in Colombia. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here to share the process and the project that we have been developed over the last year.
Thank you.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Sean Connelly. I'm a Pacific Islander American Ilocano artist, born, raised, and working in Honolulu, Hawaii. And yeah, very much looking forward to being here. Mahalo to Leonardo-ASU for this wonderful year, and excited to share some work today.
Thanks so much, Sean. All right, so our first presentation today is going to come from Alinta. So please feel free to take it away.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Let me just share my screen with you and get this started. Does that look good?
That looks good.
Great. Hi. So what you're seeing here is an Australian magpie, or Coolumburan to the Indigenous peoples of the Gold Coast in Australia. They're not related to the Eurasian magpies, though they share a common name in English. Australian magpies are known for their really impressive improvisational singing abilities. Their songs sit outside of their general communicative vocalizations. These are songs that appear to be sung for the purpose of singing itself, or perhaps as general territorial displays. As vocalists, the magpie can also mimic almost any sound it hears, including human-made songs. It's uncommon in the wild, but my mother once taught a magpie to sing the children's song, Pop Goes the Weasel, a song that the magpie then only ever conjured up when in a particularly bad mood. The Australian magpie's songs can also be combinatory in that they can recombine and remix their own phrases together to create vocalizations that can appear to be novel as the song progresses. I'm intrigued by the connection between magpies' abilities for combinatory song and the creative coding expressions of digital poets and artists who are using algorithms to generate experiences, poetry, or storytelling. You could say that magpies are inherently avant-garde in their approach to song, as if following an algorithm that recombines and builds upon a set of auditory information. So why did I start today by talking about magpies and their singing techniques? Well, firstly, because it's just tremendously interesting to me, but importantly, it's one of the many ideas explored in my Leonardo Imagination project. So today I'd like to take you through some condensed thoughts that I've been coming to through this critical making. The Imagination Fellowship allowed me to ask a big, futuristic, science fiction inspired question, and to then address that question through creative and technological development. And the question that I chose to ask was, how can machine learning and artificially intelligent models help us to imagine animal vocalizations in the context of a human language? Or in other words, what are we doing to make Dr. Dolittle a reality? And what are the cultural and ethical implications of doing so? But more specific to my position as a practitioner, I began to ask, how do we design interfaces for interspecies communication? What does animal communication data look like when presented on our human-made technologies? And what impacts could these interfaces have on cultural folklore or narratives that we develop about other species? Humans have long yearned to talk to other species in the same way as we talk to each other. It's a concept we see across fantasy and folklore and children's stories, where species could speak a kind of a universal language if only we had the tools or we had the temperament to tap into that magic. Of course, we can learn to recognize the communication techniques of other species quite effectively without needing a shared language. Just ask anyone who lives with a dog. But for the purposes of technological development, species communication methods are really divergent. And so creating technology to connect them is not really all that easy. So for anyone who's not aware, there's a growing interdisciplinary field of researchers and practitioners and technologists who are coming together to develop new sort of AI systems and models as means to interpret the signals of other species. And in doing so, we need to think further about this question of the animal voice in artificially intelligent communication systems. So the MeowTalk AI cat translator by Aquilon, not by me, is an example that gives us a picture of how interspecies translations can be represented in a visual and textual display. So MeowTalk analyzes sound inputs and returns a written translation through current audio machine learning technologies. And you can see some examples here on the screen that I've sort of written all over. It's worth considering how these language and visual display choices are actually representing cat subjectivity, right? So through syntax, through punctuation, and through the wider sort of storyline being developed, this app makes decisions about how cats might talk. And examples like this show us that it's important to consider not just how we train ourselves, but also how we train our AI to represent animal signals, because there are messages that we send through language and through design choices. So it's easy to create a call for action, but it's harder to then fulfill it. So what have I actually been making over this time? I've been developing 4 separate audio listening devices that you can also access completely publicly via a range of smartphones. These devices listen to specific vocalizations of specific species and translate those into a human language in real time. Like any speech to text kind of interface, it can make mistakes that I'm forever working on, but they can definitely listen to these particular species, recognize certain vocalizations, and then display an interpretation via your own screen. So each interface uses experimental techniques in the development of audio recognition AI models, and then uses techniques from the field of combinatory and algorithmic poetry to more poetically interpret this data by combining phrases and images as suggested translations. So firstly, what are the species that are included? So the species include 2 different vocalization groupings. So this includes 2 species with fairly wide-ranging vocalizations with observable behavioral contexts. In the humanities and arts, we might call this meanings. So these species are the grey-headed flying fox and the Australian noisy myna bird. both seen to the left of your screen. Then there are two much more experimental cases, AI listener models created for two songbirds capable of improvisational combinatory songs, and those are the Australian pied butcherbird and the Australian magpie seen to the right of the screen. Growing up in regional Australia, I have almost daily moments involving these species, including direct interactions. I work as a wildlife volunteer rehabilitator, working predominantly with flying foxes. I also live under a flying fox food path, and I hear their noisy interactions every night. A family of magpies live just outside, and I wake to their singing each morning, and I watch them perhaps as often as they watch me. While I work from home, the noisy miners are constantly telling me what is happening outside: a snake, a goanna, a crow, or alternatively, everything is calm and good. One only needs to listen, not to see, in order to be told by the miner birds of the outdoor activities. The butcher birds come by looking for worms, and I'm reminded of my grandmother who shared a special connection with them. She would feed them, no doubt completely inappropriately, in her backyard, showing off their hunting prowess by throwing food high into the air for them to swoop for and naming each one Peep. So each model represents a separate process of research into the known and observable vocalization and behavioral habits of each species, followed by audio recording fieldwork and some exploring of sound archives, choosing strong, clear audio samples, audio editing, classification of those samples into classes set out by vocalization. So we would commonly call this a corpus for AI training. You would then teach these classes to a machine. You would then test it. And then finally, you would consider how to present this as an outcome, as a creative work. So as this technological process of building an AI model is so involved, I won't detail it today, but you can learn more about it in my upcoming article for Leonardo Journal. So I don't wish to oversimplify the process of developing animal vocalization corpori or the process of developing species-specific audio AI models just by skipping over this process part very quickly. But in reality, it's taken me now 4 years and many iterations to learn how to do this and to try to develop a process that actually somewhat works for creating species-specific listening and interpretation devices. So let's take the magpie listening device as an example through which to detail the design process. So the magpie is a really tricky case, as this bird creates improvisational songs for which science does not have all the answers. The magpie audio AI model has currently been trained to recognize 68 different song bits. In other words, pieces of song that a magpie might combine together as they improvise. Given a magpie song is not necessarily the same twice, this approach to training AI on pieces of song means that at the very least, those pieces can be picked up by users' phones, regardless of the order that they may be sung in or how often they are sung. This does mean there's a myriad of other potential phrasings beyond those 68 that I have not yet accounted for. But each song piece is currently linked to one suggested translation that will come up on your screen. And I'm currently in the process of designing an entirely new system in which each piece can link to multiple potential suggested translations. So what are those suggested translations and who writes them? Well, people who I talk to about this project often assume that it's AI itself who conjures up the translations, but it actually doesn't. I do not trust the technological equivalent of OpenAI's ChatGPT to write poetic translations of animal signals for me. Indeed, here's an example of what it might come up with when you try to ask. You can make up your own mind, but I think that they're not so great. You know, a mating call, a symphony of desire in morning's embrace. You can see why I haven't let this be up to AI to sort of create these interpretations. So AI doesn't write it. I do. I write it and then I teach to my model how to display them, meaning I have an element of control over the words, the screen layout, the visual aesthetic that's being produced here, because all of these elements are being selected and combined by the model, depending on what it hears. So this returns me to my original questions. How could we design interfaces for species vocalization AI models? This slide shows some screenshots of two of the audio models that you haven't seen so far in the presentation, the noisy miner and the butcherbird, showing some of the interpretations that they're giving as they listen to these species vocalizing. If I was to compare this to the Meow Talk example given just a minute ago, my own distinctly sort of anti-UI design emerges very prominently. The text is purposefully difficult and overtly poetic. The display is less intuitive, but perhaps more immersive. I hope what comes forward is the potential for a cultural imaginary that situates these species as minded, mysterious, interesting. I hope it shows these species as being uncontainable by our own language rather than the simple-minded, the direct, the boring ways, to be honest, in which animal vocalizations are displayed through terms like alert call, mating call, social call. I want to use anthropomorphism to an advantage, and I don't want to represent species as less than when it comes to their communication abilities. I never know how long that I've spoken for, so I'm just going to kind of wrap up here. And I'd like to end by reminding and inviting you all that you can try out this work for yourself. It is, after all, free for public use via a smartphone. Remember that these are listening devices. They're not sound-producing devices. So if you're located in Australia, all you may need to do is go outside and be amongst the voices of the magpies, the butcherbirds, the miner birds, or the fruit bats. If you're located elsewhere, you can test it by using online sounds, such as from YouTube videos of these particular species. If it's possible, I'll try to drop a sound file example in the chat for you to use in your own time. But you can go to the QR code on the screen here. It will take you to alintakrauth.com/AI, where you can have a look at the work in its current form. So thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions after the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alinta. So exciting to see your work always.
Thank you.
So if anyone has questions for Alinta, again, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Santiago to share their presentation. Please take it away.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna skip the first introduction. First of all, I want to thank the Leonardo and ASU team for the support and company over the last year. Special thanks to Daniel Villegas, my collaborator in this project, and of course to Alinta and Sean that have been part of this collective brain. In 1991, the city of Recife in Brazil saw the publication of the manifesto Cangrejos como Cerebros, or Crabs with Brains, written by the singer Fred 04 and DJ Renato, giving rise to the music movement known as mangrove beat. I became enamored with this rhythm of mangrove beat during my academic exchange in Brazil in the late 2000s. As a central symbol associated with mangrove beat is that of an antenna firmly planted in the mud, receiving and emitting signals from across the globe. The manifesto positioned the mangrove ecosystem as an epicenter of fertility, abundance, diversity within the global brain.
Mangroves are a vital part of the Caribbean coast ecosystem. They protect against storms and hurricanes, prevent coastal erosion, and purified water. These coastal environments are under threat. As sea level rise, mangroves are disappearing, and the vital flow of oxygen from seawater to the mangrove is rapidly decreasing due to temperature fluctuations and changes in the ocean currents caused primarily by climate change. Rising temperatures are causing mangrove trees to grow thicker roots that block the flow of seawater, causing system to suffocate, taking with it critical habitats for a wide range of species and displacing Afro-Colombian fishing communities. As the mangrove disappear, so too the soundscapes vanish. These soundscapes will soon become an acoustic fossil, a haunting reminder of the sounds that were once here. We stand amidst the sound that will soon be lost as the rising water engulfs. Yet there is a temporal quality to these sounds that radically opens up the present to the future of its resonance. They are acoustic fossils, remnants of a world already lost, but they are also acoustic, opening up time to anticipation of its arrival, the arrival of time itself as a sense.
The aim of the project has been to design and produce a portable community site-specific device capable of traveling to mangrove communities in the Cartagena region and elsewhere. The device is technically proficient in operating within mangroves, creating meditative listening spaces that harmonize with local soundscape.
I don't think they're looking at those emails.
Yeah. The device intends to generate reflection on the threat, challenges, responsibilities, and opportunities of life in the Caribbean amidst climate change, emphasizing environmental consciousness and immersive meditative listening experience. Additionally, the project seeks to prompt contemplation on our position in a world where the uncertainty of our actions coexists with the inevitability of their consequence, and how we can reconceptualize our relationship with an environment in which we are not merely external actors, but also implicit recipients of our actions. Now, I would like to go in detail to some aspects of this device. It has 4 parts. The central part that I call the crab brain, the speaker, solar panel, and a network of 5 contact microphones and hydrophones. This is the crab brain that inside has this microcomputer. The sound of the prototype is generated by a pure data patch running on a Bella microcomputer. This setup uses sound interface with an open source Linux environment, allowing pure data to run on the Bella in real time. In addition, a set of protocols facilitate interaction with the computer through specially designed contact microphones. This is the internal computer housing. This is the sculpture that is surrounded. And here are the two knobs that control the delay effect of the device. This is the electronic diagram that we have designed and produced. And this is a diagram of the software, where here you can see the 5 microphones, low pass filter, a delay effect. And the delay effect is controlled by the knobs, but also a humidity and temperature sensors that make the atmospherical conditions an actor in the performative activation of the acoustic fossil. The sounds are transmitted from the crab brain via Bluetooth to the speaker. The speaker also works as a power bank of the computer. The power that is powered by the solar panel that is floating next to it. So making the device self-sufficient to operate in the mangrove ecosystem. And these are the guts of the device next to a mangrove tarantula. Each of the sculptural elements of the microphone of the device incorporates symbolic shapes from local flora and fauna, pre-Columbian objects, and materials associated with the spiritual dimension of the mangrove that emerge from the research and the collaborative process with the mangrove communities. These are some of the textures of the trees of the local fauna that became part of this creating process, not only from the hardware, software, but also sculptural dimension of the project. The piezo microphones were integrated to mangrove roots and seeds. Here you can see one of the microphones. The microphone acted as extensions of our bodies, connecting us to the forest through cable, the contact microphones, and hydrophones, inducing a novel sense of corporeality, initiating an affective connection with the forest, creating a feedback loop of acoustic vibrations. The Acoustic Fossil Project initiated a collaborative process in 2023 with the communities of La Boquilla in Cartagena and Rincón del Mar in Sucre, with the local organizations Mundo Verde and Afroismar, organizations dedicated to ecotourism, restoration, conservation, and recovery of mangrove ecosystem. Mundo Verde self-identify as an environmental activist group focused on ecotourism within the mangrove. Afroismar, a pioneer organization in mangrove reforestation, has developed a distinctive technique that amalgamates ancestral wisdom with contemporary science to replant red and black mangrove flora. Presently, they have cultivated around 70,000 mangrove trees, offering these to international institutions as carbon compensation. Despite their innovative technique, they have received little support from local governments and international institutions. During the fellowship, the project expanded its scope through transdisciplinary collaborations with the NGOs, scientists, custodians of local knowledges, and artists. The next phase of the project is current in the production stage, with a large collective activation scheduled for August 2024. The ultimate goal is that acoustic fossil will be able to re-signify the mangrove through sound and sci-fi narrative as a living entity, interconnected and as a sacred and spiritual space. Acoustic fossil aims to create a harmonious narrative that ethically respects the ecological, cultural, and spiritual dimensions of the mangrove. Through sound, it aims to preserve and reverberate the vanishing soundscapes of endangered ecosystem, reminding us of our responsibility to protect and value the natural world and the diverse communities, both human and non-human, that coexist on this planet. And before concluding, I would like to share this first sketch that was made for the mangrove acoustic fossil. It has been a long journey, but an amazing. But I want to thank all the people that have supported the project and contribute to the confirmation of this global brain. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Santiago. So great to see your work. All right. Well, now I would love to invite Sean to present.
Aloha, everybody. Let me just get this here. All right, view slideshow. Aloha mai kako. Again, my name is Sean Connelly. I'm an artist in Honolulu, Hawaii. And today I'm going to share a preview of my current work in progress, which corresponds to this fellowship and culminates in an installation at Pacific Standard Time in the fall of this year, located in San Diego. The title of the work is Gut Technics, and I'll explain what that means, as well as share a 9-minute preview of the work. But I'll introduce the work by saying this concept is part of a larger body of work that I've been working on for the bulk of my career as an artist, which really concerns what is the future of Hawaii, and what does that look like, which is an urgent issue because of the tremendous devastation ecologically and culturally that has happened here in Hawaii, particularly since 1898, when Hawaii was annexed by the United States. And the solution to many of the issues that we face today have to do with the recovery of our cultural, ecological, biocultural, cosmological systems of relating to land, which in Hawaii is more than just the Western concept of land. The term is aina, which means that which feeds. And the idea of land incorporates land, sea, sky, and people. But for this research, in order to focus on land, I have to go out to the ocean and really look at the history of Hawaii through an oceanic sense. And so what does that mean? The history of our human connection with the ocean is a future of continuity and urgent stewardship. And so the idea of gut technics dives into the history and formation of our climate data and technology, which Hawaii, not many people realize, is plays an integral role in the development of our technological history. And so anybody who uses GPS today is actually tied to Hawaii history, whether they realize it or not. And so the work, which is a multimedia installation, what you'll see today is a preview of just a film component. It ultimately is challenging us to reimagine our evolving relationship between the ocean, human cognition, technology, both across the surface and seafloor of Earth, which is ultimately an ocean island. And so the work particularly speaks to a future, imagining a future where there's this moment in our history where deep sea technologies are not just extracting information and material, but restoring it, restoring the material, enabling us to reconnect with the ocean as more than just this distant place, but the fundamental seat of planetary thinking, the place of our emotion. Like, what does it mean if the ocean is our heart? Which ultimately is in service of supporting, why do we need to shift our imagination and possibility? And that is in service of supporting the need for, more biocultural, ecopolitical demilitarization of our consciousness with the ocean, and this idea of how does the ocean contribute to our global source of well-being? Because the ocean is the source of our well-being. So the title, Gut Technics, it serves to reconceptualize the concept of the ocean as somewhat of an elemental gut brain. And this comes from the collision of three ideas, which you're probably familiar with. The first being the concept of the human gut-brain axis. The second, kind of taking a step out of the box and thinking of the technological idea of remote sensing machines that mine the ocean for climate data as part of this sort of like new consciousness or new cognition, technological cognition, where technology is through data synchronizing to the ocean. But then without getting carried away of this sort of like concept of like digital ocean twin and stuff like that, remembering what the human heart of that. And so we return to the cultural notion in Hawaii known as the na'au, which is the concept of essentially the gut brain concept in the indigenous sense. And so before I continue with the actual video, just a few sort of theoretical foundations for the work in terms of grounding our relationship to the ocean. First, we have the history of canoe migration, which goes back, tens of thousands of years. We could argue that humans, our hominid ancestors, were already oceanic, navigating the ocean by canoe migrations all the way up until our present day with the hokulea. And then the invention of the marine clock in the 1730s, which brings sort of Western navigation online, the invention of longitude, latitude. The invention of radio navigation in the 1970s, which really owes itself to military occupation of the Pacific, which is sort of the crutch that leads to the invention of GPS in the 1990s. And then now we find ourselves in the current territory of remote ocean sensing, and the way that this history of navigation and communication over the continuity of our entire human history really shows that we never really actually left the ocean. And so with that said, I'm going to share the 9-minute clip of the video, which collages together found content online. It has mixes of different archival sound clips, as well as maps that I've produced. And in the Q&A, we can sort of discuss more in detail about the why and whatnot. But it's 9 minutes, and let's see. Let me make sure that it's shared. Oh, Oh, I hope you could have seen the presentation I was giving. Okay. Apologies. There we go.
Sean, we actually can't see it right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there we go. Oh,
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. So real quickly, I'll just zoom through what I was clicking on. We got the ocean, Naal, navigation, history of navigation, and then getting into sort of the Hawaii land use, etc.
beautiful.
Apologies for that. And then here, I will share the preview of, it's actually 45 minutes long for this particular one, so I just have clips.
could have a fight on its hands as it tries to extend a 65-year-old lease of state land at Pohakaloa Training Area.
The Army put out a positive environmental impact statement concerning the use of the Big Island land, but an activist takes aim at the report. KNTV4's Jefferson Davis shows us what is at stake.
The U.S. Army says it needs this leased land to continue training and make sure it's mission ready. It has leased 23,000 acres of state land at the Pohakaloa Training Area since 1964. In its environmental impact statement draft, the Army says that the best decision would be to continue leasing. But not everyone thinks this is the best decision for Hawaii.
Why the hell should they renew a lease to a unit that has contaminated that land with a wide range of toxins and possibly endangers the health and safety of people, plants, and animals, tourists and visitors alike?
The U.S. Army's own website admits that uranium-based weapons were used for training at Pohakaloa Training Area between 1960 and 1968. It also says there's
Carter has. You think you are in America. You are not in America. You are in a colony that is in Polynesia that was forcibly taken, just as, I might add, all of Eastern Europe was forcibly taken by the Soviet Union, which Americans think is a very, very bad place. The bad, bad Soviet Union. Well, the bad, bad United States of America took Puerto Rico, it took Alaska, it stole Indian land, it took Hawaii, it took Guam, it took Micronesia, Palau, and you had better learn that history because you are the recipient of an imperialist tradition.
The Omega navigation system is a worldwide all-weather navigational system providing a fixed accuracy of 1 to 2 nautical miles.
And I'll end there. Mahalo.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sean. That was so interesting to see your work, and I'm so excited to hear you talk more about it. All right. So virtual round of applause to our 3 Imagination Fellows for all of the hard work that they have done over the last 9 months and for these fabulous presentations. We are going to now move into the Q&A portion of the day. And so we are going to be taking a page from my colleague Christiana's book. She recommended that our fellows actually ask each other questions. And so each of our fellows has come up with a question to ask the other 2. And so we're going to start with those questions. And then from there, we'll move on to the questions from the chat, which I see 2 that we have received. So if anyone else has any other questions that they would like to ask, please feel free to put them in the chat, or when the time comes, you're welcome to unmute yourself and share them vocally as well. But for right now, I am going to ask Alinta to start. We'll go in the order that we went in with your question.
So, hi, Santiago and Sean. So I have a question for you. When the 3 of us first met digitally, of course, we kind of already had our ideas for what we wanted to create. So we never really saw each other's sort of initial ideas phase. So it's a deceptively simple question, but what are you inspired by? How do you come up with your ideas? What does that sort of ideas phase look like for you?
Sean, you wanna continue the synergy, or should I go?
Sure, I can hop in. Give you another moment to think if you like. That's a good question. I would sort of say, you know, for me, it really an important aspect of my practice is the concept of continuity, and the importance of tapping into my own experience in the context of that continuity, which is beyond me. And so the place of Hawaii, the place of the Pacific, and our history, our often overlooked or under-recognized history, is a constant source of inspiration in terms of not necessarily like educating people about Hawaii history, but just centering it in my work. And the reason why it's important to do that is, you know, in Hawaii, kava mamua, kava mahope. In order to know the future, you need to know the past. And so there's an aspect of truth telling that's an important part of the work. And art is a really art is a very contentious space for that. But sometimes art can be more of a safe space to do that truth telling than other contexts. And so that kind of in a bubble is how I would answer your question at the moment.
Well, I think that in the specific context of the fellowship, there was an initial idea that is a product of a continuation of other projects, and I feel that the process of gathering new ideas and inspiration comes from not from a process of the inside to the outside, but rather from the outside to the network. So it's like a process of contamination and an infection of ideas that happens in different moments and over different layers. I feel that once the project becomes a verb and becomes an action, it starts to involve other people, and those ideas start to contaminate, regardless of your initial intention, and you become a way of managing and like canalizing those different ideas, and connecting with other peoples and other projects and ways of thinking in order to push the project into different stages. I will say that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea of contamination, of being infected by different ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the question that I have prepared for my colleagues is, your projects and practice, how do you conceptualize technology beyond its conventional portrayal as a tool or machines, understanding technology as an interconnected web of tools, systems, and cultural practices that mediate human experience and shape our understanding of the world? How do you integrate this broad understanding of technology into your work?
You or me, Sean? I'll start. This is a very interesting question. I think in my particular work and in this particular project, my work really can't exist outside of an assemblage of actors, including technology, but also living, breathing beings. And this is both exciting, but also a really major challenge for my work and for the audience participation of my work. My work just simply doesn't function without certain birds or bats making sound. And so in that way, they themselves have really full control over whether my artwork functions as intended. But also, I think we live in a time when people are using certain AI, or this term AI, products a lot, and are starting to learn about the biases and copyright in corpuses of data that neural networks are trained on. But most people don't know how to make a neural network or a corpus or the code that's involved. So instead, we're seeing people starting to create their own folklore or conspiracy theories around AI as an entity, rather than sort of understanding it more deeply. And I find that problematic only when it leads to misinformation about the agency of technology. So I actually wish that we would have more mediation, or meditation, I should say, meditation on artificial intelligence as a term that represents tools and technologies, rather than moving sort of directly into that social psyche of like entities or gods or unknowable intelligences. So I hope we sort of stay religious, sort of ontological and realist in our approach to artificial intelligence and technologies. That's kind of my thinking, is sort of the tools and technologies that I use are just so central to the work, and also not at the same time. How about you, Sean?
Yeah, that's a good question. The concept of technology is super critical in my work. If you had asked me this question, 15 years ago, I would have talked about the indigenous Ahupua'a system of Hawaii, which is the unit of land from mountain to ocean that was used to basically manage resources, but also cultivate food. And was ultimately more than a land division, but pathways of regenerative lifeways. With that said, I think today more than ever, the cultural and native concept of nature and the future is going to be very helpful in terms of how we reconsider technology. Contrary to the thinking that like human and nature are separate, in the native sense, there's no distinction between human and nature. And so the same sort of question comes up with this sort of like the distinction between technology and nature. And when you think about it, humans have always been technological. Technology is a fundamentally human phenomenon. And if humans and nature are not separate, then technology is not separate. And so thinking about, for example, in the use of the term technology as tool, in the context of oceanic voyaging, canoe navigation. Back in the day, it used to be called non-instrument navigation, but that actually turned out to be inaccurate because the canoe itself was a tool of navigation, and the technology of that tool is actually the engagement of that canoe with the surface of the ocean and the waves and whatnot. I mean, when you think about it, the concept of metal and technology, at the very center of our Earth is essentially a giant metal ball. Like the inside of our planet is, consolidated a metal the size of our moon, which in effect, as far as the navigator is concerned, the Earth itself is a metal tool. And with that said, there is a reverence that goes along with this idea of nature as technology. And so ultimately we do need to respect technology, maybe not necessarily for the technology itself, but for where it comes from. So that's kind of a huge, I think, I take that kind of thinking for granted, just because I'm from Hawaii. But I think that there is a really big paradigm shift that has to happen with how we think about a technology or how we conceptualize it. And part of that begins with reconceptualizing like our own relationship to nature. And that's kind of what a lot of my work has sort of been looking into. And I'll just sort of say the very last clip of the video I shared, where it's sort of showing this rotating wireframe of the Ahupa of Heia, which is essentially a watershed that was appropriated to create this the large antenna that was one of 8 sites in the world for the Omega navigation system. And so that at that moment in history between the 70s and the 90s, when we were developing GPS and we needed this sort of like interim technology, the radio navigation to enable communications when satellites were on the other side of the world or for ships and submarines. The only way it was possible to get an antenna large enough was to incorporate the entire valley into the structure of that antenna. And so there's, 1,000-foot cables like to get the receiver high enough so that it could transmit a message from Hawaii all the way to Japan to Scandinavia. There would be these basic, massive radio waves. And that's kind of how, through the tests in Hawaii, that's how that realm of, electromagnetic understand engineering. That's how they sort of learn that if you calibrate the frequency, you can either reflect it off the ionosphere back to the Earth, or if it's high enough, you could pierce the ionosphere and communicate to a satellite. So a lot of that understanding of technology, the physics of it, was actually pioneered through their studies in Hawaii using Haiku Valley, which is what we kind of show. So yeah, anyway, that's a good question.
Thank you, Sean.
Don't let me nerd out too. Well, I guess that's my turn. So my question is, how do you navigate the integrity of your original message or vision while remaining open to the unexpected insights and influences that emerge during your creative process, particularly when collaborating across disciplines or integrating with a particular place with culture?
You go, Santiago.
Well, I feel that initial message, or rather than seeing it as a message, I feel it more as a desire that I have to develop the project, and how through the process of collaborating and working, that desires becomes with affinity of other desires of different disciplines, but also the encounters and disencounters that are in the process. Because normally I feel that in this process we emphasize on the encounters with other disciplines, and I feel that in this collaborative process, and especially with various disciplines, communities, forms of knowledge, there are a lot of common places, but at the same time there is a lot of misencounters, and I feel that navigation between the encounters and misencounters is what start to shape that desire of that becomes like a force to guide the project through its process and its time. So that'll be my answer.
Yeah, I really agree with Santiago there. And I think that this question really goes right to the heart of what art science collaborations are, and whether we expect artists to act as science communicators. Every sci artist who I've ever known will say that they absolutely are not just a science communicator, but at some point they've been asked to be. And for me, this suggests that collaboration between artists and scientists, which is the area that I work in, is probably best in that sort of learning and discovery phase. We gain knowledge from other disciplines and then we apply it in our own ways. And in my case, the majority of my practice has been to learn across disciplines, to gain knowledge across disciplines, but I wouldn't say that I collaborate so much across disciplines. I often work alone, and maybe that's kind of circumstantial. I'm not an urban intellectual. Like I say, I'm the crazy bush hermit. So for me, the sort of you say the integrity of vision, for me, it's often sort of cut not by people or fields, but by technology itself. You know, working in the digital arts, the aesthetics of what you produce is highly dependent on, for instance, the software that you're using. It's really easy to look around and say, oh, I can tell that that's been made with Touch Designer, or I can tell that that's been made with this and that. The aesthetics of the tools that you're using or the software really dictates the outcome and what you can create. So and also in my case, I'm attempting to make this work that's for public use, right? So my vision is also entirely at the mercy of hundreds of different types of devices that people access the work on, with the different microphones and the different screen sizes. It will all affect what it looks like. And I have to let that go. I can't be responsible for people's sort of technology choices. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's kind of the reality, is that in my case I have to sort of let that go and let people be the boss of their own experience. But I think these sort of questions in terms of my work, the aesthetics and the function are sort of just as important as each other in a sense. So yeah.
Awesome. Great job, fellows. Now we're going to move on to some Q&A from the group. And so I'm going to pull up some of the questions that I have here. Jason Nelson asks, for all speakers, how do you rethink your work for showing and exhibiting or experiencing in different contexts, platforms, sites, and situations? For example, a public space like a gallery projection versus an interactive work on an individual's phone.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with this question. Just one thing, I just lost electrical power, so I'm with my internet phone, so I don't know if eventually if I get offline, apologies. Hopefully they sort out very soon, but I'm here. So I want to, for this question, there is this word then in English differs than that in Spanish, but is deployment, or in Spanish is desdoblamiento, which is the possibility of being yourself in a different way. And I feel that every exhibition space or circulation of the project requires this process of deployment or redeployment, the possibility of the project of being itself in a different way. And when you work in a site-specific context, not only in a spatial context, but also in a community base or a very marked contextual area, that idea of redeployment, of being able to become something else in a different place, becomes always a challenge, the same level of the process of creating the process, and also trying to identify what cannot be translated, because I feel that the need, or like the pressure of always trying to translate everything into something else, or trying to translate a word into a different language or into a different context, is challenging. So the idea of the resistance of not being able to translate or to manifest that idea of the impossibility of translation, I feel that it's very important. But I assume those challenges of transforming the work as as the challenge of creating the work itself. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I'll just jump in because you mentioned phones, and so obviously that relates a bit to what I'm doing. I'm in the situation with this particular work where, as I say, it's made for this very specific situation, this very specific size of device and very specific kind of way of being deployed. And this has come up for me as well in terms of, if I were to take this work into a gallery, what would it look like? And which I'm going through at the moment because the work is meant to go into ICEA next month. And so we've been talking about what does it look like in that scenario. And one thing that's been really nice about it is that we've been talking about this idea of public activation and using this as something to get people outside and to get people going out in groups to not get into nature because it will happen in a city, but get at least to sort of get outside and to interact with the world. So I think that's a really nice idea that's going to hopefully come from this.
Yeah, I guess I'll just share on my end. Well, I have a multimedia practice, and so I do sculpture, I do film, and then I do cartography, as well as my social practice work where I embed myself into other Native Hawaiian nonprofits that are doing the grassroots work of actually recovering cultural sites. Places of cultivation. And so I think there's that technical aspect of it, but oftentimes I find myself exploring that question through the context of material and relationship with the community. And so yeah, for what I shared today specifically, it's sort of one of a three-part installation that's going up. And so what the 4 clips that you saw is part of a 45-minute long research video, which uses sound clips and montage to tell the sort of Hawaii history of technology in the Pacific. And it sort of leans towards this speculative future about the ocean becoming a part of our bodies as part of our gut brain, which the mediator for that is the technology. But then there's also another video that's going to be on the side that's going to be animations of this 3D model of the seafloor and this ahupa'a he'ia. And then in the center of the gallery, there's a plinth with a mirrored surface that will have actual Argo float sensors, actual ocean sensors that will have that will be rebranded to sort of simulate their sort of alternative future. And so I think for those aspects, I do really like the multimedia component for dealing with those kind of shifts. But yeah, that's actually part of that ends up being part of the experience of being an artist is if you have a video and then you're gonna whether it's going to be presented on a large screen in a plaza versus access on your phones, to a certain extent, you kind of have to let go of the art and let it be what it's going to be. So in that way, technology becomes a co-author.
Awesome, Sean. Thank you for that response. And I think that actually tees us up well for another question that's come through, which is perhaps Alinta and Santiago, you could share about future iterations or development plans for your projects.
Yeah, I've got so many ideas that have come off from this particular idea. It's just been really, really fantastic. This started as an idea for, you know, maybe I could do this with a single species, and I was working with bats, and it all was this sort of very personal thing that made sense in that moment, and then now it's just sort of turned into something so much bigger. The next idea that I have to finish up all of this first, you know, but the next idea is I'm really interested in listening to the voices of bird species who are no longer with us, so bird species who are extinct, and using this as a moment to reflect on extinction as something to be melancholy about, and something to be sad about, and something that is happening, that we're going through, you know, this sort of the sixth mass extinction on Earth. And so I've been starting to train my AI models on extinct bird sounds, and of course there are a couple of interesting things about doing that. One is that it will never be able to hear those birds. So it's almost a futile process. And also trying to find examples that I can use to do that with is very difficult. It's looking through sound archives, looking through really old audio that isn't very clear. And so that's been a really interesting process. And I find that when you tell people that you're creating, you know, something that turns magpie sounds into poetry, people think it's fun and exciting, but when you start talking about it in terms of birds that no longer exist, it becomes something more more capable of gaining empathy, and more capable of sort of making people recognize not the sounds that are there, but the sounds that aren't there. So I think that's the direction that I'd like to go in.
So I have here like some of one of the pieces that you saw in the video that I sculpted. So the next phase of the project is the activation in the like a more choreographed activation of the piece in the community of Rincón del Mar. So that's scheduled to happen in August of this year, where the objective is to have a film production team that is going to be able to produce a moving image piece that is going to become a deployment of the project. One of the things that had this project is that was meant to be specific for the mangroves. So this project is the continuation of the acoustic fossil. That is a sound installation that we also developed with Daniel in Cartagena. And that installation had recordings made in the mangrove of La Ciénaga in Cartagena. So the objective of this project was like to go back to this place and to these communities and to develop a project that makes sense there. And many aspects of it become they resist to be translated in other contexts. However, through the video, photographs, and this creation of a new work, of a third layer work, the objective is that the process is able to travel and to iterate in different places as a moving image piece. But also, of course, the idea is to expand this portable dimension of the project, that the work is very portable and fits like in a box, in a very lightweight box that it can travel not only to different mangroves in Colombia, but also across the world, of course, is my ambition, because as the research developed, the mangroves are present in multiple countries in different latitudes, and the idea is to keep accumulating those soundscapes and different interactions in the project.
Awesome. All right. Next question. This one is from Ed Finn, and it's specifically for Alinta. Is that, Alinta, I'm very curious to hear more about your poetic process. How did you approach the question of composition, translation, interpretation of animal communication?
Yeah, so if I can share my screen with you again very quickly. I saw this question come up, so I've just very quickly run and found another slideshow to where I've kind of gone into this a little bit. It's been different for each of the species, and so it's almost like it's kind of a bit difficult to talk about them all in one go, because all four are different. But for the two species that I mentioned that have I guess you would say the very clear or well-known vocalizations, that there are already lots of science texts out there about what those vocalizations might mean, or at least the contextual behaviors that happen at the same time. I got really interested in sort of biosemiotics, or the semiotics of animal communication. And in the semiotics of animal communication, Smith and Harper set out 3 different types of communications. There's icons, there's symbols, and there's indexes. So for instance, this was with the flying fox sounds that I had. I tried to sort of separate them into those groups, thinking about which might represent which. And then, oh, you can't even see this. And then I started to think about what were some particular English translations that might fit with these kind of areas, these icons, these symbols, or these indexes. And then I started thinking about what are the human equivalents of those? What's the human equivalent of the icon? What's the human equivalent of the symbol? And what's the human equivalent of the index? And so I could start to try and match different things up. And then I started thinking about an entirely different sort of thing that I was really interested in at the time, which was a book by Laura Jean McKay called The Animals in That Country. And she was trying to think about how do I use the animal voice in a way that's not very straightforward or very anthropomorphic. And when people started to review her work, they said that these animals sounded like they were talking through a really bad concrete poetry translation app. And I thought to myself, but that's kind of cool, right? If animals could talk through a translation app, that's probably what it would sound like. Why should it come across as really straightforward? So I sort of took those ideas of from these general scientific notions of this is a mating call, and this is a distress call, and this is an alert call. And then rather than turning that into something like I am distressed, thinking about what could be the poetic alternative for that. But also, of course, within that is just my own writing of it, you know. So then all of that meets me, who is kind of the place in which it kind of all falls down, I suppose.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So the last question that we have for now is from Katie McNamara, and it is, what are your personal connections to each of your projects?
should I jump in? I think hopefully you could tell a little bit by my talk that there's a very personal connection here to my work in terms of just having grown up around these species and really caring about and thinking it's important that we expand our notion of our social sphere, or who we count as being in our social sphere, expanding that to include other species. Even here where I am in Norway right now, I go out, I walk down the street, I'm not just seeing other people, I'm seeing a lot of other animals that just happen to be around. They are in my social sphere, and I'm navigating the world around them and with them. And so I find that really important to share. Also, my history, I did this project really because of my history in bat care and of being a part of that community, and noticing the amazing work that bat carers do, but also just having that as a space for being amongst and being beside the species that this work talks about. So when I say things like, biosemiotics and looking at scientific papers, it's also very much been about talking to actual human beings who spend their days with these species and considering their viewpoints. And there's definitely been times when, their viewpoints have trumped, in my mind, the scientific papers' viewpoints, and so it's been really nice being in that community as well. So yeah, definitely a lot of ways in which this work connects.
Beautiful answer. Yeah, I guess I would say, since I've talked about history a lot, as somebody who's native to like Pacific Oceanic diaspora, I feel that coming to terms with the history of my work is also coming to terms with my own history. And also, thinking about how that informs my understanding of my responsibility towards the future, and what role I can play in fulfilling that responsibility. And so I'll share this real quick. This image from the clip of the video rotating, this is the this is sort of like a watershed, for lack of a better way to describe it. But in red at the very top, that's the sort of 1,200-foot Omega navigation system that was built there. But here, the three X's, one X is where I grew up. The other X down here is where I went to school. And then the X closest to the valley, where the technology was installed, is where my family farm is. So that's where my sister raised my niece and nephew, and like it's where my dog was born and all this kind of stuff. And growing up, you could see that huge antenna from miles away. It was eventually disassembled in the late 1990s, but there's like a memory where we had that. And for my entire life up until I started doing specific research in college, nobody actually really knew what it was. Like nobody in the community or my family or my community, was like, oh, what is that? I was like, oh, that's just like some abandoned structure. Only until recently did it start becoming more common knowledge for the average local person to know, like, oh yeah, that was like a top secret radio navigation system that was like built in the 1940s that did all this kind of stuff. And and still people don't actually don't actually grasp just how significant it is that from that little valley, like radio waves hundreds and hundreds of miles high were being sent across the globe and were being received from across the globe here in Hawaii. And so yeah, there's like a there's also like a, well, the way I found that information was I started doing research on, there's this idea that Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders were societies without cities, because when, by the time people like Captain Cook came over and they observed people in the Pacific, they were like, oh, look at these Native people just like running amok, like scattered across their environments, and they didn't actually acknowledge that perhaps the dwellings appeared scattered, but they were scattered in very specific ways that corresponded to the environment. And so in that way, Pacific Islanders did have their forms of urbanization or urbanism that were completely unacknowledged by the West. And so thinking about reconceiving of the Pacific, of Pacific Islanders as this sort of like oceanic urban civilization, the canoe migrations, the canoe navigations were like a important part of that. And so that sort of history of canoe migration and connects to my history as a my early ancestry as Pacific Islander before colonialism. And then so tracking that history of navigation, and then finally arriving to the ocean sensor and the correlation between remote sensing and satellite navigation, satellite communication. There's this like gap in that history that brought me straight back to where I lived. And I was like, wow, what is the odds of that I would literally devote my entire thesis to this topic, and only in that process realize, wait a minute, like my thesis is literally actually about where I'm from. So there was something like calling me to that, and that really is that place. There was a sort of a story that of this place where I'm from that needed to be told, that without people knowing, like how do you, not to get political about things, but how do you get reparations for the destruction of a place if you don't know who destroyed it? So there's like a sense of responsibility to protect the place that I'm from, to help restore the place that I'm from. And one of my vehicles as an artist doing that is making that connection to history, and sharing my history with others. So yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Sean and Alinta. It's a good question and a difficult one. I feel that personal connection with the project. I mean, I have been living the project for very intensely over the last weeks, preparing for this presentation. And when you sleep and you are always thinking about the project, it becomes like part of who you are and how you perceive the world. And in a way, the project changed you in the way that you change the perception of the world. But in a broader context, I feel that in Colombia is a place of multiple histories of violence, and have like certain peaks. In my childhood, the guerrilla, narco-traffic, and paramilitary violence confined us into main cities. And just very recently, we have been able to explore different places that were completely permeated by a very intense violence. Just the town where I'm here in the studio was ruled by this violence, and this need or desire to know different places have take me to explore different contexts. I am from Bogota, from the mountain, and that relation with the sea and the mangroves is a mystery. And when you go there is immediately triggers you a sense of urgency, an urgency of understanding, of compiling those testimonies of the violence, those testimonies that has not been written, of the atrocities of things that happen and that still happen and that will happen very soon. And also a desire for this empathy when I start producing those first materials of the project, and this image of this kid playing with the microphone. I saw there the project, or at least that desire that moved the of what I see is the objective of doing art and like continue with this project. That is very difficult to verbalize, but it's easier to show and say like, yeah, look, someone got connected with the project, or and move him, or at least is moving me. But one thing that I see myself as an artist, which is very challenging, is that you work in a temporality of the uncertainty, and that's one of the specificities of art that cannot be measured, and it's very difficult to apply very objective categories to understand the efficiency of what we do in art. Is our projects gonna make a better world? How we're gonna measure that? And when you produce art, you art with this uncertainty of that you don't know in what dimension or in what scale what you do is going to affect the people that share with your work or the world. But this idea of being able to work in this notion of uncertainty, and that you don't know, or that the temporality is not immediately, that perhaps what I have shared today doesn't make any sense, but hopefully in next 10 years, someone will visit a mangrove and gonna say, oh, now I have a way to connect to this ecosystem, or to this place, or to this kind of sound. It was what moves, but it also at the same time, this challenge of not being able to measure the effects of this kind of projects. And I feel that is one of the things that I want to highlight about this fellowship, that is there had never been like a clear expectation of what is required as an outcome, because it's a pact of trust and an agreement of this uncertainty, that what we are doing here, we don't know what's the scale, what's the dimension, but we trust each other, and we help each other to continue developing these processes.
Thank you so much, Santiago and Alinta and Sean, for all of your responses here. I don't see any additional questions in the chat, so I think that we might be ready to wrap up. Any last words from any of you before we conclude?
I just want to say thank you again to Leonardo and to ASU for the support and the help that you've provided to us. And one thing that's come up for me over the course of this fellowship, and it sort of came up in my mind again tonight as we were talking, was something that I've been kind of struggling with in my practice and in terms of a way forward for it, is that in one way or another, we're all interested in creating works that look towards this good of the future and maybe have an effect, as Santiago said. And at the same time, in some way or another, we all rely on extractivism. We all rely on technologies that are taking those metals from the earth, whether they are kind of seen as a part of nature or not. And this is something that I've been thinking about in terms of the good versus the sort of cause versus effect of what it is that I do. And so I've been thinking a lot about care and about empathy, and about how what we do really has to try and move people to be more responsible and to do things with more care. And I think that's really the role that media arts can play in the future. So that's my final word.
Yeah, I'll just second that gratitude for Leonardo ASU. It's been a productive year. It really helped me, the regularity of our sessions really helped me stay productive. And yeah, some of the things that are coming up next after this meeting are our artist articles, which I'm excited about. So I'm working on that, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to, I don't always get to pair an installation with written work. And so that process has also been really helpful in terms of, like some of the things you were saying, Santiago, about like metrics, like how do you measure your own sort of impact with whatnot. Especially when it comes to producing the work of art itself in relation to our experience. The work might be dated this year, and it might have, been the outcome of maybe a year of like intense focused production to get to a installation. But the process starts way earlier than that. And so I'm in the context of ASU and like the educational setting. I'm really excited about the ways that art can help to bridge the divide between not just art and science, or like academics and art, but art, science, and like the public, the general public. And so this stitching together different things that were said today. Right now, one of my things that I'm thinking about at the end of this conversation is remembering that role that art plays to connect people to using art to connect people to science, and finding ways that art can also empower the voice of culture in science, the voice of places in science. And yeah, just to sort of conclude again with my hope for, the final output of my Gut Technics project is that I'm successfully able to get to that point about shifting our understanding of these deep sea technologies, not as extractive, like tools to extract data, so that we know like what the climate's going to be, like extracting data to know what the climate's going to be versus knowing that the climate's changing and that our extraction of minerals from the ocean and land altogether are contributing factors. And we like the time to ask questions in some ways is up, and we just need to do the work. And the great news is that there are people doing the work, thinking about it. And so using art as a way to share the narrative and make those connections. I have to sort of like return to the sort of optimism that we'll make our way through it. So thank you for the platform, Leonardo, and for the encouragement and for believing in my work. And for me, this is just the beginning of hopefully a meaningful relationship into the future for all of us. So mahalo.
Yeah, thank you. I think it has been amazing. It's a unique experience, and yeah, now the eyes into the future, and I'm sure, and what I see is that all the projects are just starting, and it is really nice to be part of this path, and hopefully we continue to share information about these specific projects and others. And yeah, but it's gratitude to Leonardo, to ASU, and yeah, and to other people that was able to be connected today.
Awesome. Thank you all, the three of you, so much for your generosity and sharing with us your process and your projects. It was just so inspiring to watch the three of you work over the last year, and I can't wait to see where our work continues in the future. Also wanted to say a quick thank you so much to Ed, Joey, and Lindsay of the Center for Science and the Imagination for their collaboration and partnership on this fellowship. I've had a great time working with the three of you on that. And I think that's it. Thank you all so much. And can't wait to see the three of you fellows again in the future. And thank you to everyone that joined this conversation today.
And thank you, Jenny. You've been awesome. You've corralled us through the whole thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss all the emails and our meetings. So let's keep if anybody ends up in Honolulu, you know who to reach out to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Super.